Welcome if you dare. You've stepped into a world where shadows whisper, where every creak in the floor holds a secret. And tonight, you're about to hear a story that will haunt your dreams. Before we begin, make sure you're not alone, or you're ready to uncover what really happened in today's story. Don't forget to subscribe if you're brave enough, because what lurks in this channel is far more terrifying. Let's begin.
The sun had dipped below the horizon hours ago, leaving only the pale light of the waning moon to guide Carol as she climbed the creaky stairs to her grandmother's attic. Every step echoed with a ghostly resonance, and the chill of the night seeped through the cracks of the old farmhouse. Carol had visited her grandmother's house many times, but this was the first occasion she'd been left alone overnight. A gust of wind rattled the window panes, reminding her of the stories Grandma liked to tell about the white ghost that haunted the old family farm. "The white ghost only comes out at night," Grandma would whisper with a mischievous grin to those who least expect it. Carol shrugged off the tales as nonsense, but alone in the attic, she couldn't help feeling a prickling unease. She reached the top of the stairs and pulled the dusty chain of the single light bulb. Its dim glow revealed a clutter of forgotten relics that loomed like giants in the shadows. Drawn by curiosity more than spirits, Carol began to sift through the boxes. As she rummaged, she recalled Grandma's hushed stories of a once thriving farm, of mysterious disappearances and vengeful spirits who walked the earth long after twilight. In the far corner, she spotted an old, leather-bound journal. Its pages were brittle, and the ink had faded to a smoky gray. Carol turned the pages carefully, her breath hitching at the sight of her own family members mentioned within its worn covers. And there, between the faint lines of neatly penned entries, were accounts of eerie sightings of the white ghost. According to the journal, the ghost was a mourning woman, dressed in a flowing white gown, who roamed the fields searching for her lost love. Legend had it she was wronged by a member of Carol's own lineage, cursed to haunt the family until justice was served. A sudden rustle in the darkness yanked Carol back to the present. The light flickered, and her heart skipped as cold tendrils of fear gripped her spine. Peering over the boxes, she saw a shadow flit across the far wall, an impossible figure, draped in a luminous shroud. Her breath shallow, she whispered into the gloom, "Who's there?" The room held its breath, and then silence, save for the distant howl of the wind. Gathering her courage, Carol decided it was probably nothing more than a reflection, a trick of the mind. Determined to prove her logic right or wrong, she clutched the journal to her chest and descended the stairs. Downstairs, she huddled by the flickering light of the fireplace, flipping through pages, absorbing each chilling entry. Somewhere between past and present, Carol's tired eyes fluttered shut, and she drifted into an uneasy sleep, cradled by dreams of white specters and forlorn whispers. She awoke suddenly with a start, the room icy cold and her heart pounding in sync with the clock on the mantel 3 a.m. With a nervous glance around the room, her gaze fell upon the attic door, slightly ajar. A pale gleam seemed to flow beyond it, drawing her in, gripping the journal like a talisman. She steeled herself and walked towards the door, each step heavier than the last. Pushing it open, she was met with the sight of the attic bathed in an ethereal glow. There, swaying gently as if caught in a non-existent breeze, stood the figure from the stories, a woman in white, her face a solemn mask of both beauty and sorrow. Although terror clutched her heart, Carol felt an inexplicable compassion for the apparition. Her grandmother's tales whispered in her mind how the ghost wanted only to be understood, to find solace and closure. "What do you want?" Carol asked, her voice shaking. The ghost's eyes, once vacant, met hers in a wealth of ancient sadness, poured forth The apparition gave a slight nod towards the journal Carol still held, framing the air between them. Understanding coursed through Carol, a story incomplete, a truth untold. She flipped through the pages as the apparition faded, leaving behind a sense of peace and words sprawled anew in her grandmother's hand. These last entries, clearer than the rest, told of a love affair thwarted by envy, of a woman scorned, not by the living but by the prejudice of time. And just like that, Carol understood what she must do to set the record straight, to tell the ghost story anew, granting her the peace she so longed for. The dawn broke through the windows, spilling honeyed light across the room with the first rays of morning. The attic was just an attic again, devoid of specters and shadows. Carol carefully closed the journal, her heart lighter than before. She now had a purpose beyond that of family heirlooms to ensure the truth. At last, saw the light of day, and with it, the white ghost could finally rest. In the days that followed, always with the warmth of her grandmother's smile, Carol began to craft a story for the world to know. Gone were the hushed tones of fear. In their place blossomed understanding and redemption. The village of Clifftown sat perpetually cloaked in mist, an eerie shroud that gathered in the creases of its cobblestone streets and clung to the weather-beaten cottages, perched precariously on the edge of the cliffs. At the far end of the village, in a dilapidated manor that locals avoided after sunset, lived old Edith, endearingly known to some as Crazy Grandma. Despite her endearing nickname, there was whispered fear about Edith's home, a place that seemed more a nest of dark enchantments than a simple habitation. Edith herself was a figure wrapped in mystery. Her eyes shone with unsettling clarity beneath her wild, silver hair, and her laughter echoed with a strange resonance that unsettled even the bravest of hearts. And the tales, oh, the tales they spun. Those who dared it said she kept company with Jinn, those capricious spirits of fire and air, unbound by the constraints of human morality. Some claimed these Jinn were her servants, bound to her by ritual and secret commands hidden in the folds of her crumbling leather-bound tomes. It was on one fateful evening, as the moon hung heavy and orange over the churning sea below Clifftown, that young Amelia and her friends decided to put the old stories to the test. Fueled by curiosity and adolescent bravado, they crept through the thickets toward the manor. "It's just a house," Amelia whispered, trying to quell the nervous laughter bubbling in her throat. Her companions, Marcus and Sophie, nodded in false agreement, their eyes darting toward every rustling leaf and shifting shadow. The manor loomed larger as they approached, its windows black and voids against the stark white of its peeling paint. Despite its apparent abandon, candlelight flickered through the front window, casting grotesque silhouettes that twisted and danced like phantoms in the night. "We're just going to peek inside." "All right," Marcus said, his voice firm but tight with trepidation. They crept across the porch, each creak of the old boards sounding like a thunderclap in the silence. With bated breath, Amelia grasped the tarnished doorknob, surprised by its warmth, almost as if a pulse throbbed beneath her palm. The door swung open silently, revealing a hall choked with cobwebs and the faint smell of lavender and something more acrid, something that made their skin prick with unease. Grandma Edith sat in a plush armchair at the far end, seemingly savoring a cup of steaming tea. Well, she crooned, her voice paradoxically both soothing and chilling. "Who have we here?" The color drained from Marcus's face as he stammered. We just wanted to come in. Edith interrupted, waving them in with a skeletal, and adorned with heavy silver rings. "It's been too long since I had guests." There was something about her eyes that compelled them, drawing them into the parlor, where shadows overlapped and intersected in rhythmic patterns, hypnotic and alive. Edith watched them with a bemused smile, as though they were characters in a story only she understood fully. "Sit," "My darlings," Edith instructed, gesturing to a worn velvet sofa that seemed to eat the light. The children obeyed, perched awkwardly and exchanging anxious glances. "Have you come to learn about my Jinn? Perhaps," she asked, sipping her tea with exaggerated grace. At this, Sophie's curiosity piqued, despite her fears. "Do they really exist?" Edith chuckled. "Ah, but of course, invisible to those without the sight, but always present, always watching." Her words hung in the air like incense. Just as Marcus opened his mouth to speak, a gust of wind blew through the room. Though outside, the trees stood still. Amelia felt a touch of cold on her cheek, and the light in the room flickered ominously. Edith set her cup aside, rising with an elegance that belied her age. A slender candle, stained with long-used wax, sputtered on the mantel. She closed her eyes, murmuring words in a language that seemed older than time itself, and the air around them shivered. "Show them," she uttered, and the temperature in the room plummeted. From the shadows emerged figures, indistinct and flowing, their shapes shifting like smoke in the wind. They circled, drifting elegant and purposeful, their movements casting no reflection. Edith met the children's wide-eyed gazes with a knowing smile. "My faithful companions." Her expression turned solemn. "They have been bound to me since I stumbled upon my grandmother's grimoire in the attic, and so they remain, my protectors until the tome chooses its new keeper." Amelia swallowed hard, sensing a weight settle upon her shoulders, a destiny she had unknowingly approached from the moment her curiosity brought her to this threshold. "What do you want from us?" she whispered. Edith's smile softened. "To pass wisdom. My time grows short, and the Jinn must serve another who respects their nature." Sophie, remarkably composed, asked, "And if we refuse?" Edith's eyes twinkled with something indecipherable. "Then you leave tonight, and the Jinn remain my company until fate brings another child of curious mind." Marcus exhaled a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. "What will you have us do?" Edith motioned toward the staircase leading upward into shadows. "Ascend to the attic. Choose wisely amongst the stories and scribblings of ages." The three exchanged confirmation nods, a silent pact to see this madness through together. As they climbed the spiral stairs, faint whispers, both tender and terrible, guided them onward. In the attic, bathed in moonlight slicing through a fractured skylight, they discovered a chest, ancient and embossed with symbols they recognized from the stories Edith had imparted. Beneath layers of dust, the grimoire lay waiting, its cover marked with the same obsidian eyes that met their gaze every time they reflected on crazy grandma's parlor. With trembling hands, Amelia picked up the tome, feeling the arcane energy ripple through her fingertips. The decision was made, not by lips but by the silent communion of kindred spirits standing before her as they descended. Their hearts beat as one, bound by the promise of secrets immortal spun now into the tapestry of Clifftown's destiny. The gray slate of the old white mansion loomed at the end of Briar Lane, like a sentinel of forgotten tales. Its turrets clawed toward the evening sky, where a copper moon hung suspended, watching over the gallery shadows below. Rebecca Wyatt, known by the children in town as Crazy Grandma, was one of the last remaining heirs to the mansion, and she used its echoing halls with a mastery of madness. Her hair hung silver like tangled cobwebs, and her eyes gleamed with a spectral glow whenever she wanted to tell a particularly unsettling tale. But Rebecca was renowned for something far more sinister than her storytelling. This crazy old bat, as the townsfolk whispered, had control over ghosts like a puppeteer over marionettes. Some said it was the ancient curse of the mansion. Others speculated it was a pact made in the whispering winds of midnight rituals. But the truth was wrapped in layers of hellish mystery only Rebecca herself could unravel. Tonight, the candles in her great hall flickered with an unusually fervent flame, casting shadows that seemed to dance more vigorously than the wind outside allowed. Rebecca had visitors, distant relatives, the Chester family, who believed that selling the Wyatt mansion was the key to a brighter future. Little did they know their weekend stay at the old manor was an invitation to a world beyond reason. "Welcome, my dears," Rebecca crooned as Arthur Chester and his timid wife, Marjorie, escorted their two wide-eyed children inside. "Make yourselves at home." But the hall felt anything but homely as the fireplace exhaled a gust of chill air, and the large portrait of Rebecca's deceased husband, Daniel Wyatt, seemed to watch them, his painted eyes brooding over their discomfort. As the family settled, Rebecca's true show began. It started subtly, a misplaced fork appearing at the children's end of the table, an errant breeze rattling the chandelier in rhythm to her ancient mumbling. But soon, the air thickened, and Marjorie swore she saw the shadows themselves reaching out with finger-like tendrils to touch Arthur's shoulder. "Did you feel that?" she whispered, fear threading her voice. Arthur frowned, brushing it off as superstition. "Just an old draft," he assured, though the words lacked conviction. Rebecca, sitting at the head of the table like a queen with no kingdom but the gloom, began her tale, weaving strands of story as if the very mansion willed her to speak. "Have you ever wondered," she mused, "why the Wyatts never truly leave this house?" The children leaned in, their innocent curiosity overtaking caution. A curse or curiosity? Who can tell? Grandma's eyes seemed to glisten as she went on. "My family has always had, shall we say, special relations with those who choose to linger. You see, spirits here, they pay a visit, sometimes borrowing our voices, sometimes our footsteps." Arthur chuckled nervously, but the sound caught in his throat when he saw what could only be described as a ghostly silhouette weaving through the candlelight, smoothing Rebecca's chair before vanishing into vapor. Marjorie's attempt to dismiss it failed. "It might be time to retire," she suggested, her hand gripping her daughter's shoulder tightly. But the night is young." Rebecca's voice rose in enthusiasm, thrumming with a eerie undercurrent. "Why rush away when stories are begging to be told?" Yet, Rebecca's tale was no ordinary story. It was the story of Daniel Wyatt, entangled with the house itself. And it was a tale Rebecca hadn't finished in decades. One the spirits waited, hoped, begged to hear. For within its conclusion lay the tantalizing promise of rest. Suddenly, the candles waxed brighter, smoking as furious drafts whipped through the room. And Daniel, the painting now more visage than art, seemed to listen intently, as if pleading for his wife's voice to carry him back, limping through the shadows toward his freedom. Rebecca Wyatt's mastery took hold. Within these halls, every Wyatt must reckon their fate. The house creaked with her words, echoing the unspeakable. "But not I. I choose mine willingly." And there they appeared, the hosts of the restless. Figures materialized one by one. Maidens from bygone eras. Children lost 2 years of neglect. Shadows of impertinence and pain that had long sought her bidding. They crowded the table, whispering pleas and groans of unfinished stories etched deep across centuries. Rebecca moved to her feet, her eyes glistening silver as she walked amongst them like a conductor before an orchestra of the forgotten. The night only holds sway till it finds a way to bring dawn, she proclaimed with a resolution as sturdy as stone. Marjorie stood, pulling Arthur and the children toward her, preparing them for escape. But when she glanced back, Rebecca, crazy grandma, was holding court with the spirits themselves, her touch a balm to their anguish. At last, standing amongst her spectral companions, Rebecca smiled. "Tonight, we ended," she whispered to the phantom air, her voice soft. The ghosts began to fade, their forms dissolving into delicate wisps of twilight. As Rebecca completed her tale, she had honored every echo disrupted by tragedy, binding the lost seams of their stories with her own relentless defiance. The Chester family began to hurriedly step backwards, all except the youngest, Charles, who remained captivated, witnessing firsthand the luminous glow that took to lingering around Rebecca herself. "What's happening to Grandma?" he asked, wonder mixing with a tiny trace of fear. "Let's see," Rebecca whispered, her hand reaching over to steal the last plea from Daniel's painted visage. Granting in the end he desired all these years. "Rest, all of you." The hall sighed, lifting the dust of ages past. The last embers of the evening flickered away in gentle waves, sweeping across the floor. And then they were gone. Daniel, the ghosts, even Rebecca to some extent, was free. Before the Chester family understood the profound change that swept through, morning light broke, bathing Briar Lane in gentle warmth. Arthur led his family from the mansion with a silence broken only by birdsong. They would return with plans to settle the estate's final chapter, but they knew even before deciding that Rebecca and her spectral companions had found peace, an enigmatic legend to linger through generations. But Crazy Grandma, to the rest, would remain an eccentric legend woven into the tapestry of their hearts. A whisper on wind with eyes that glistened like old stars. And as her mastery faded with the embers of dawn, the mansion itself wore a lighter aspect, tales unraveled, and ghosts freed from silence. In the remote village of Alrilla, nestled beneath jagged mountains and veiled in perpetual fog, whispers carried tales of the old woman with eyes like storm clouds. Grandmother Zara, as she was known, had lived through a century of seasons, her presence an omnipresent shadow over the villagers' lives. Many claimed she had seen beyond the veil of this world and commanded darker forces. The villagers endured her whims, for angering her was to court disaster. Crops withered overnight, livestock fell ill, and children spoke of shadowy figures flitting through moonlit nights. All was attributed to Zara and her rumored mastery over the Jinn legend that took on dreadful form every time misfortune struck. "We cannot live like this," breathed Fatima, a young mother, her voice hushed as if the very walls had ears. Gathered in the modest abode of the village elder, a group of villagers nodded, their faces lined not just with years but with the weight of their collective despair. "We must end this suffering. We must confront her." "Aye," agreed Yasser, the blacksmith, gripping the wooden club he used to shape steel, as if it were a crucifix. "Such a life we endure her torments, always waiting for the next curse. Why should she hold such power over us?" Hassan, the village elder, raised a hand. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed flickers of fear. "Approach her. Think carefully before you act. Zara might seem frail, but if the stories are true, it doesn't matter if they are true," Fatima interrupted, her resolve unshaken. "Living in this fear is no life at all." A grim silence settled over the room, in acknowledgement of both the danger and necessity of their intent. Their decision was made as the sun dipped below the horizon, stretching shadows across Alrilla. The villagers gathered by the twisted oak marking the path to Zara's home. This was no sacred pilgrimage, but an act of defiance. The path wound upwards, an unkind trail through the murky forest bleeding with mist, twisting through trees like skeletal fingers against the twilight. Every step forward felt like a step away from the world of reason toward Zara's domain, where reality warped as much as the gnarled trees. They reached her dwelling as night fell, a small hovel of stone and mottled thatch, perched precariously on the cliffside. As the villagers neared, the winds bore a sinister hum, an echo of low, unintelligible murmurs that set spines on edge. Zara awaited them at her doorstep, a silhouette against the dim interior. Her eyes were, as the villagers remembered, piercing, impossibly old, yet disturbingly aware. "You come in anger," Zara said, her voice a gravelly, ethereal whisper. "What do you expect to find solace, absolution?" Fatima stepped forward, her heart pounding like a war drum, but her voice was clear, firm. "Release us, Zara. We cannot live bound by your anger and darkness any longer." Zara chuckled, a sound like dry leaves scraping across stone. "Do you think it's that simple? The Jinn care not for your struggles. They serve as they please, but never for free." Yasser took a defiant step forward. "We are not here to bargain," he said, gripping the amulet around his neck, an heirloom said to ward off evil. "We come demanding peace, even if it must come through confrontation." It was then that the wisps of light appeared, flitting in the air like fireflies, whispers rising to a crescendo, a chorus of voices not of this world. The ground beneath them pulsed, threatening to tear asunder. "Peace is not found in conflict, Yasser," Zara replied, her eyes dark pools filled with unfathomable depths never leaving his. "Retribution begets retribution. My time is near. Yes, but know this, with my end comes yours unless you curb this cycle." A swell of realization dawned in Hassan's eyes. "What binds you, Zara? Tell us. Perhaps together we can." The old woman paused, her form suddenly frailer under the moonlight. "Regret, my dear friends. Regret bound to destiny. I shall free you, yet I warn you what I release might find sanctuary in your own hearts." With a slow, deliberate motion, she raised her arms. The air around them crackled with an otherworldly energy, focusing into a single, blinding point of light that exploded in a silent tide over the land. When the villagers dared to open their eyes, Zara was gone, as if swept away with the mists. Her house collapsed into rubble. The heaviness that blanketed Al-Rilla for countless years dispersed, replaced by an unsettling quiet. Years passed. The village thrived, and the story of grandmother Zara became a cautionary tale told by elders. Yet, some nights, when the wind howled across the mountains, a familiar unease settled once more. It was then that the villagers reminded themselves that darkness lurked not just in the shadow of the past, but potentially in the recesses of the present. The lessons left by Zara whispered as reminders. The price of peace is understanding, and the darkest corners are sometimes those within. And thus, in the quiet after the storm, the village learned to look within, for it was there the true Jinn lay their own unvanquished fears.